My name is Emily, a 28-year-old woman living at home with my mother and older sister Catherine, who is 2 years my senior. Because of this, my family often refers to me as an unemployed failure in my late 20s. At 28, I find myself confined to my room. "Hey, unemployed failure, pay this month's rent." My sister Catherine bangs on the door, her voice raised. After graduating from school, Catherine landed a job at a local company but quit, citing issues with her juniors. Rumors suggest she was the one bullying them, which caused problems. Now, she takes up short-term part-time jobs, proudly calling herself a part-timer. "At least I'm working part-time," Catherine often says. "You're the unemployed failure here, the lowest in this house." I've never been good at socializing, dating back to my school days when I was constantly compared to Catherine. She was outgoing and popular, while I was more reserved. Catherine enjoyed teasing me, labeling me a failure and spreading rumors about me to her friends. "She talks to bugs in the garden," she'd say, or locks herself in her room reading strange books, probably nerdy stuff. Her words and actions made me withdraw further. I avoided socializing, joined no clubs, and had no friends. My hobbies became my solace, my escape from reality. My mother, a stay-at-home mom since divorcing my father when I was young, often scolded me. "If you continue like this, you won't survive in society," she'd say. "Look at Catherine. Learn from her." But emulating Catherine was impossible. After the divorce, both my mother and sister directed their negative emotions toward me, blaming me for resembling my father. Despite this, it was my father who financially supported us, ensuring Catherine and I never struggled. I secretly kept in touch with my father without my mother's knowledge. Occasionally, we'd exchange messages. When it was time to choose a high school, he told me, "Go to the school you want, Emily. I'll pay for it." He managed to persuade my mother, and thanks to him, I attended the high school of my choice. However, my mother became stricter with me, seemingly displeased that I had gone through my father. She would often complain loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "It's tough having such an incompetent daughter," or, "It's strange how responsible Catherine is." Over time, I stopped confiding in my mother about myself or my future, believing it would be futile based on past dismissals. I resolved to handle things on my own. My mother held a grudge because I had once confided in my father. Her response was simply, "Once you turn 18, do whatever you want." As time passed, my mother and Catherine remained unaware of my interactions with my father, and both my sister and I grew up. Despite everything, I hoped for reconciliation with my mother and Catherine. Our bond had weakened due to the divorce, but I clung to the belief that even a small gesture could mend things. Each year, I carefully picked out gifts and celebrated Catherine's birthday. "What's this? Such poor taste," Catherine would often remark. I attempted to cook meals in the kitchen, but my mother would shut me down with, "This isn't edible. Don't do it again." No matter what I did, I couldn't improve my relationship with them. Years passed, and I began eating out more often. "How can you afford such luxuries? Where are you getting the money?" My mother would scold me. I dodged her questions, simply saying, "I have a part-time job." After turning 22, I began paying rent after my father's financial support ended. Catherine quit her job, leaving both her and my mother with no income. Their financial insecurity seemed to intensify their harassment towards me. I was charged $500 a month for rent and food expenses, while Catherine paid nothing. Despite living under the same roof, we rarely interacted or shared meals. Despite the strained situation, I decided to contribute. My family is in trouble, I thought. I have to help. However, I was shocked to discover something unsettling. I found out that, apart from me, my mother was demanding a monthly allowance of $4,000 from her own parents. Knowing my close relationship with my grandparents, they consulted me about this request. I was taken aback by the amount my mother was asking for, considering my grandparents were elderly and no longer working. Realizing they couldn't afford such a sum regularly, I asked my grandparents to redirect the $4,000 allowance to me instead, intending to pass it on to my mother. I apologized for burdening them with her demands. My grandparents looked apologetic but assured me, "Don't worry about the money. There's a reason we didn't give it directly to your mother." I feared my mother might exploit the situation if she knew I had access to that money. I held on to hope that Catherine finding a new job would ease our financial concerns and restore our family dynamics. With that hope in mind, I continued to pay a total of $4,500. One more thing, Emily, my mother announced with a smirk. Mom and I are moving to a new apartment soon. Which new apartment? I asked cautiously. Catherine proudly handed me a brochure of a luxury high-rise. Here, it's amazing, isn't it? The location, amenities, and view were indeed top-notch, but I couldn't fathom who would pay for it or why they were moving there. After all, Catherine only worked part-time jobs. Lost in thought as I examined the brochure, Catherine remarked, "I might let you live there too." "You? Live there too?" she taunted. "You're unemployed trash who can't do anything without us, right? Well, if you insist, I might consider letting you live there." "What will happen to this house?" I asked. "We'll start the selling process and put it on the market within a month," Catherine replied, dismissing my concerns. Ignoring Catherine's remarks, I had been feeling our current house was cramped. While evaluating whether the condo was worth its price, I decided to consult a friend knowledgeable about real estate investment. He's a friend from my student days, I explained to my mother and Catherine later. His comment was, "I think it's a decent property," and that convinced me. My mother and Catherine exchanged glances, clearly thrilled. It seemed they had always intended for me to foot the bill. "Well then, we need to start the paperwork immediately," my mother said cheerfully. "You, the shed-in, can use this as practice to get out and handle it," Catherine added with a smirk directed at me. Despite their remarks, I had already planned to go ahead with the purchase, so I didn't argue. I immediately contacted the real estate agency, went to their office, and proceeded with the purchase, not just the rent. When I returned home and informed them that I had completed the procedures, both my mother and Catherine cheered loudly. Ignoring their noise, I quickly retreated to my room. A few days before the scheduled moving day, I found a note on the boxes containing my belongings saying, "No need to transport." "What's this about?" I asked my mother and Catherine. They were casually sipping tea, already done with their preparations. Catherine feigned ignorance. "It's your stuff, right?" "Oh, aren't we moving tomorrow?" I questioned. "Only Mom and I are moving to the condo. We've decided to sell this house. You need to leave ASAP. We're leaving you behind because you're bad luck. You can't be unemployed forever. Stand on your own 2 feet, my mother added, making cutting remarks. "I see," I simply replied and returned to my room. On moving day, my mother and Catherine's belongings were swiftly packed and taken out. They were excitedly bragging to the movers, "We're moving to a condo with an amazing night view." Of course, they completely ignored me. I stayed in my room, focused on my work. A few hours later, my phone started ringing incessantly. "Hello? Hey, unemployed trash, what's going on?" Catherine's voice pierced through the phone. "They told us the contract isn't set up. Emily, didn't you handle the paperwork? I thought you could at least manage that, you useless piece of junk." The shouting was so loud that I instinctively moved the phone away from my ear. "Well, I did handle the paperwork," I replied calmly. "What do you mean? They told us we aren't the current leaseholders." Catherine's voice grew high-pitched and accusatory. "I did handle it. I did rent it. I bought it, but since only Mom and you were supposed to live there, I sold it." "Sold?" "That's right. The day they told me I couldn't move with them, I sold the apartment. It was a bit of a hassle, but I didn't want to pay for a home that only you would live in." Their voices sounded like they were arguing over the phone. "Why don't you two just renegotiate the contract?" I suggested. "My naive sister has a point, Mom. Let's renegotiate it for us. We can make Emily pay us back later," Catherine suggested. "Yes, let's do that," my mother agreed. The call abruptly ended. A few hours later, my phone rang again, this time with Catherine's shrill voice. "You schemed something, didn't you?" "What are you talking about?" "I figured as much," I said to them. "Why can't we sign it?" Catherine asked. "I don't know," I replied. "They said something technical, something about not having enough credit or something." Catherine isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. She probably doesn't understand the term credit, I muttered to myself. "They don't trust you to sign a contract," I explained patiently, as if teaching children. "It's about social credibility. You often claim to be a part-timer, but barely work, making you pretty much unemployed trash. They won't lease to someone like that. Why could you, an unemployed trash, sign it and not me?" "Something's fishy. He must have raped something," Catherine protested. Realizing the conversation was going nowhere, I decided to clear things up. "Listen, Catherine and Mom, are you listening? Remember I went to an art school?" I began, despite Mom being against it because it was far away. I've always been drawing. I even won a national competition in high school. My achievements were recognized, and I got a scholarship to attend a famous art university. Neither of you knew, did you? I never told you guys. I'm still drawing, using Dad's room for it. The monthly rent of $4,000 might seem high, but I felt it was okay given the hassle of moving. Oh, I'll send you the link to my portfolio website, I continued, sending it to both Catherine's and Mom's phones. This site showcases my achievements and past works. There's also a contact form for potential buyers of my artwork. I'm not an unemployed trash. I've been investing my income as well. I think my annual income is on par with business owners. My income is leagues ahead of yours, Catherine, who claims to be a part-timer. That's why I have credibility. You're lying? Stop making things up. Catherine's voice was faint and incredulous. I could faintly hear my mother's voice. I've never been particularly good at interacting with people, but I've always had a keen interest in art and paintings. Finding joy drawing objects around the house, replicating plants and copying insects, the art book my father secretly bought for me on my birthday is a treasured item. To my unsophisticated sister Catherine, it probably looked like something a nerd would read. Being a successful artist, I of course don't work for a company, I thought, reflecting on how to my mother and Catherine, I probably appeared as an unemployed recluse trash. After all, they've never shown any interest in me before. They have no clue about the real me. I don't know or care if you're some great person, but I won't forgive you for betraying Mom and me, my mother said. I was even impressed that they could pick a fight at this moment. You're selling the house within this month, right? What? Selling it. That's what you and Catherine decided, right? To kick me out. I could tell over the phone that both my mother and Catherine were speechless. I've already moved, as I told you, to one of the apartments I had invested in. I heard my mother and Catherine starting to panic on the other end, saying things like, "This is bad, we have to cancel the sale." After they removed their belongings, I had another moving company take out the rest. I'm already relaxing in my new place, sipping my coffee, I remarked. Looks like you two might end up homeless. Hope you can cancel the sale in time. How much more will you mock your family to feel satisfied? My mother said. Hearing her say that for the first time, I shouted back in anger. That's my line. I don't expect them to understand how I felt all these years being treated as the lowest in the family. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. There are so many things I couldn't do because of Catherine, many things I resented her for, but I believe the path I chose was right. Through art, I've made many friends and acquaintances. And then, I'm engaged. I'll be living in my new home with my fiancé, so there's no room for you. Please enjoy living without the newest nuances, I declared and hung up. Are you okay? My husband cautiously asked from behind. He seemed surprised because I rarely raised my voice. Yeah, I'm fine. They're like parasites, so they'll figure things out even without me, I replied. I've given up on my jobless sister in her 30s and my mother in her 40s who's the same. They somehow managed to cancel the sale of the house and moved back in. I lost all reasons and the willingness to pay them rent or the $4,000, so I stopped all financial support. It seems my penniless mother turned to my grandparents again. Emily did something terrible, she's the worst. It's all because of her that we don't have money, she seemed to claim. She probably thought things would work out if she just acted spoiled, as always. However, my grandparents were furious when they heard the whole story from me. Shameless. The one who's truly awful is you, isn't it? How could you treat Emily like that all these years? Mocking her, demanding her money, treating her like a nuisance. Unbelievable. You deserve to be abandoned. My mother lost trust even from her own relatives. Catherine tried to get a job again, but it seems she's struggling. It had been years since she last worked. She occasionally called me, Emily, I realized I was wrong too. Let's put that behind us. Can you introduce me to a job or maybe a man who can be my husband? I was wrong too. What does she mean by I was wrong too? As expected, Catherine never changes. Asking for a job is one thing, but including a husband in the mix, she's clearly looking to leech off someone. Sorry, I don't think I know of any jobs or men that would be a match for you, I replied, meaning she's too much to handle. Oh well, let me know if you find any. Does Catherine think a prince will come to whisk her away? She's already 30, yet still so immature in this respect. Catherine and my mother are so alike. The reason my mother divorced my father was because she solely depended on his income without doing anything herself. My father, having a job with frequent overseas assignments, found it challenging to raise children, so he had no choice but to entrust their custody to my mother. He told my mother to raise us properly since he was providing ample child support. As a result, while my mother doted on Catherine, it seemed she grew to resent me, who took after my father. And now, even I have turned my back on my mother. If Catherine ever gets married, I can already foresee a similar future for her. I'm glad. I couldn't help but let those words slip about what my husband asks that I didn't turn out like Catherine, with a kind husband, a fulfilling life, and a job. I have things that neither my mother nor Catherine possess, especially considering I grew up being treated poorly by both of them.